Hi, I'm Chris O'Connell. You're watching Cartoonist by Night.
Welcome to Cartoonist by Night. I am Anthony Laatsch. I am joined here with Troy Dongarra, D. Brad Gibson, and our very special guest, cartoonist and coffee drinker, Matt Hansel. How's it going, Matt?
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Hello.
Awesome.
Hey, Matt.
We are doing
Welcome.
great. When we reached out to a fellow cartoonist here, we had to get one of the best that's out there. And if you could pick any topic in the world, what is that topic?
I would talk about daily comic strips.
Daily comic strips. There we go. It's
Nice.
going to be a nice episode here talking about daily comic strips. We had a companion episode with newspaper comic strips, Sunday comic strips, all of that fun stuff. But it's never a time limit on these kind of topics because they are timeless. So what we're going to do here is hang out and talk about daily comic strips. We're going to learn all about Matt Hansel. But before we jump into that, we're going to find out what we are going to be drawing tonight. So, Matt, do you have any idea what you are going to work on tonight?
I do. I am going to work on a daily strip in keeping with the theme of daily comic strips, and I am going to be drawing or inking a Hagar daily strip. So I'll be lettering and inking it. So
Nice.
Awesome. That's going to be awesome to see. D. Brad Gibson, what's on your plate tonight?
I'm not as prepared, so if I can't think of anything, I have some drawings I didn't finish from other shows in a stack here. So, like just the beginnings of them, and so I might throw those in. But otherwise, I'm just gonna warm up with doodles, and then I might draw some cartoon characters when we start talking about comics. I might get an idea there.
Excellent. Troy, do you have any idea what you're going to be working on tonight?
I'm going to try and draw Grimmy from Mother Goose and Grimm.
Oh,
nice.
But I don't have I was looking to see if I had like a chisel tip of any sort because that's kind of what it looks like to me
That's
is
what he uses. Yeah.
chiselly, and I don't have one, so I will.
If you don't have a chisel tip, Mike Peters also in the past, before he switched to that, used to use just a big fat brush.
I got a big fat brush. I could do that.
There we go. All right. So normally I work on the smallest of sketch cards here on the show, but you'll see I have a bigger canvas here. This is inspired by our guest Matt Hansel because if you follow his social medias, you'll see him doing a lot of doodles, a lot of collages of just warm up sketches and just kind of seeing all these character drawings all on one piece of paper. So I decided that I was going to do the same thing. Now I go through and I do my pencils first, so I'm going to be working on the inking them. Now, Troy off air asked what I was going to do, asking if it was going to be Beetle Bailey. He's sort of correct because what I'm going to do here is Beetle Bailey, but drawn in other comic styles. So I have a Charlie Brown
Nice.
inspired Beetle Bailey. I've got a Ziggy style Beetle Bailey, a Calvin and Hobbes style Beetle Bailey there. I got to decide if I'm actually going to give him, if he's going to be fur or an actual human. I got to decide that in the moment. I've got a Dennis the Menace Beetle Bailey. That one is I'll have to see once. That one's mostly going to come out in the coloring where I didn't have to do too much changing there. And then attempting a Hagar one as well. So
Oh, awesome.
I didn't know what he was going to hold, though. I didn't really think about that. So for right now, I just gave him the shield, and we'll see once if there's something that I should substitute in there. But yeah, I figured I was just going to kind of have some rough sketches and inks and kind of have a warm-up page in the honor of our guest, Matt Hansel.
Oh, That's very cool.
So what we're gonna
And I
do?
love I
Yeah,
love that you're a Beetle Bailey fan.
yeah, it's yeah, he's a favorite of mine. I deep dived into him when we did our first round of newspaper comic strips episode, but I will definitely be sharing that love and excited to hear your thoughts on that later on in the show. All right, so we're gonna just jump into it. So let's go into our drawings.
Mark, set, go.
Okay, so we are getting into it here. Feel free to start drawing and hanging out. We're going to talk about daily comic strips. We're going to be learning about Matt Hansel. And before we learn about his how he became an artist and all that stuff, well, I want to start with the topic at hand and kind of find the origins, Matt, of you and your experience with reading and collecting and daily comic strips and why that was the choice for your topic tonight.
Sure. I apologize too that I'm a disembodied voice at the moment. At the moment,
Some of us,
um,
yeah.
daily comics are pretty important to me because when I was a kid, I used to read Dick Tracy, Hagar, Shoe, Calvin and Hobbes, Peanuts. You know the whole Beetle Bailey, High and Lois, all of them. And I lived out in the country, and there weren't any comic book shops around or anything like that. So the daily newspaper was my way of getting comics, or the Sunday comics at least. And so that was my kind of gateway drug, if you will, into doing comics or into reading newspaper comics. I never thought in a million years that I would be doing them professionally,
Yeah.
but here we are.
I'm always interested when hearing that. Like, I think it's a common story where people would be like, "Oh, I didn't know this could actually be a job. Like, this is something that, other people do." And, if you're watching a movie and, reading comics and as a kid, you're enjoying it. And I'm kind of curious if there's a certain moment in your life when it actually, when you realize it could be a real thing and a real job that you could do, even though you didn't think it would be.
Yeah, actually, there was. It was on, I think it was Good Morning America, or it might have been CBS Sunday Morning or something like that. But they had a feature on Garfield and how Garfield was produced. And so they went to Muncie, Indiana, and met with Jim Davis and all of his assistants, and they showed the strip being produced. And at that moment, I had one of those aha moments that, wow, this is something that people do for a living, and maybe this is something I can do for a living. And so that TV segment really is what inspired me to do it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to know what I'm doing now, I just did the panel borders on Hagar. And now to make sure that they're dry, I'm taking something called blotting paper, which is calligraphy artists usually use. And you just put it on there and just press, and it sucks up all the excess ink
Ooh.
without smearing it. And then it's nice and dry.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Art Walker.
A trick I learned from Sergio Aragonés.
Oh. Speaking
Mort
of,
Walker and Dick Brown were big influences in my cartooning style when I was a kid.
Yeah, Dick and Mort both they come from a similar school,
Yeah.
and Dick Brown especially fascinates me because he started off his style is very slick. Even Hagar is kind of slick because he started off in advertising at Johnstone and Cushing in New York City before he became a cartoonist, and he did cartoons for Boys Life magazine and all kinds of accounts and things like that. And Johnston and Cushing is also the same studio that gave us Neil Adams.
Oh yeah.
That's where he got his start.
it's, yeah, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, when you were just kind of showing off what you were doing and explaining, I love watching YouTube videos, especially like Mort Walker and just like watching a cartoonist kind of just at work and you don't. There's not a lot of it out there, but so I tend to watch a lot of the same videos over and over again, whether it's Charles Schultz or Mort Walker, but just seeing that process and just And I just love now I have
I
this as a source to go back on Cartoonist by Night and see the magic happen.
I love to watch it. It's there's a couple of them on YouTube. You've probably seen them that have Mort and Dick drawing, and it's very rare to see them actually drawing.
Yeah.
They did a Beetle Bailey documentary a couple years ago, and they showed Greg doing the inking on the strip, and it was just I watch it once a week probably.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Very cool. So yes, Hagar the Horrible. That is a good little segue to. I have a bunch of share screen stuff, and I wanted to show off something. So Kevin Wolf from Happy Wolf Art, who is a friend of ours and a past guest who brought the newspaper comic strip topic to us last year as well. He's a big Hagar fan as well, and he wanted to specifically call out something that you very recently posted on your social media. We should be seeing it on the share screen here. Is Hagar
yes.
board?
Yes.
And so Kevin Wolf, he's a surfer himself, and does a lot of surfing inspired comics and cartooning and stuff. And so yeah, he wanted to bring that to make sure we showed that off tonight. So
That drawing is based on a incomplete Dick Brown drawing.
uh,
It appeared just the Hagar with the surfboard appeared as a cover that Dick did for a magazine in Sarasota, Florida, where he lived at the end of his life. So I took it and redid it a little bit and brought Hagar a little more onto his more popularly known model look. And then added the background and stuff like that. I was totally thinking of my friend Jules Riviera, who draws the comic strip Mark Trail. She's a big surfer, and so I was thinking about her that day when I drew that.
yeah, Kevin Wolf added too, just saying that drawing right there is next level cool. That's coming from a surfer right there. So I think that's high praise.
Yes, I appreciate that quite a bit. It coming right from the source, right?
Awesome. So yeah, that was just one of the many drawings, and what we're going to do here is I want to find out because of Hagar and Kevin Wolf shouted out Beetle Bailey as well. We see a lot of those kind of doodles on your Instagram, your warm ups, and so if you want to kind of talk about your love for those characters specifically, feel free to jump into that.
Oh, sure. I'm friends with Greg Walker, and I draw a beetle not infrequently because he has asked me to submit him some samples. So I actually next week I am going to put together a week or two of beetle samples to show to him. And Anthony, if you're interested, I will be happy to share them with you.
Oh yeah,
before I send them. You're a beetle expert, so maybe I can use your expertise.
oh,
But to make them as authentic as possible, here I can show this. I went online and found a bunch of unproduced Beetle Bailey gags. So these are just the sketches that they do before they do the final art. So I'm going to take, I've got about 2 weeks of them here. So I'm going to take those and turn them into regular comic strips so that way, A, I don't have to write them. And B, I can show them what I can do with their material because I'm pretty sure I've not seen any of those strips before.
Oh, that's amazing. Love that.
So who did the original ones that you got there?
Oh, the gag sketches?
Yeah.
Those I'm not sure. It's hard to tell just based on the sketches. But I know when they do their, and Anthony, you probably know this better than I do, but I know when they do their weekly or monthly, whatever it is, gag conference, everybody has their gags sketched out already. So it could have been done by Greg. It could have been done by Brian. Mort would have done some. I think Bill, was it Janota? Was that his last name? I think he probably did some.
Yeah, there's Another cool video out there, just kind of talking about the process. I think it's with like Mort and his team of people, just of him sifting through the gags and finding out what's funny or punching up jokes, and kind of like what you're saying, where you just kind of come prepared with that material, and no different than like day one of Saturday Night Live, where you do your pitches for your sketches and throw it around the room and see what makes the person laugh the
What?
most.
Right, exactly.
All right, yep, this is what we're doing. Okay, this needs some work, and maybe you'll resubmit that next week or something. But I just love that kind of collaboration, and just it's cool.
It would be so fun to be part of that.
Yeah, yeah. I just love just being a fly on the wall, just as a YouTube viewer, just watching that, and that's just amazing stuff. All right. Now going through your catalog and your personal stuff and just like your drawings, your career, there's a lot of stuff that I'm very excited to touch upon. So I want to make sure that we're not going to miss any of it. One thing I'm going to jump over to is talking about Neil Adams, because Matt Fife, a member here at Cartoonist by Night, a fellow Matt.
I know, Matt.
So he wasn't able to be here with us tonight, but I reached out to him to see if he had any questions for you. And this is definitely a very Matt Fife question, so I'm just gonna let you, assuming you know how to answer this perfectly. He goes, Neil Adams Batman or Neil Adams Superman? Question mark.
Oh man, that's a good question. Wow. I'm going to go with Superman. I love Neil's Batman. It's second to none, but there aren't a lot of people I think that do Superman really well. And Neil certainly does or did. And Superman versus Muhammad Ali is a great comic book. It's it tears down the hero, brings him back. It's about hope, and I think in times like this, especially, we could use some hope.
Yeah. Here.
Not sure I've ever seen, other than that one, I'm not sure I've ever seen a Neil Adams Superman comic.
He did Superman versus Muhammad Ali, and there are 3 or 4 short stories that he did, but
Okay.
he mostly just did covers. And he actually inked, and they were a really good pairing. He inked a bunch of covers that Kurt Swan did.
D. Brad, do you have any preference or answering that question about a Neil Adams Batman or a Neil Adams Superman? Any thoughts?
Batman.
Yeah. Troy? Well, now you just kind of.
It doesn't mean I don't like the Superman, but that's
Yeah.
what pops in my head is Batman.
Yeah, I have to say Batman just because I don't know the Superman. And I've actually not read the Muhammad Ali story before.
Neil also did later on in his career. He did a Superman miniseries in like 2014 or 15.
Yeah.
And it's I think it was called The Reign of the Supermen or something like that. It's really good. It brings in the New Gods characters. Darkseid is part of it.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Now, if I were to answer that, I could give. I'm figuring out how to structure my answer because I don't want to give away the punchline. So I'll just say that out of Neil Adams' art, I own one original art piece from him.
Oh, cool.
Sadly, it was after he had passed, but after he had passed, I've been following the live streams that his family has put on, and just auctioning off remaining work and things like that. And it's always fun watching those live streams. And
Yes.
there was an item that popped up. Now, a lot of it's being too rich for my blood, but there's a very specific piece that popped up, and I think it's going to be better if I just take it off the wall. So what we're going to do here, I'm just going to turn my camera off for a second. So I saw all the pieces presented, and I saw something that popped up that I was just like, Oh, this I have to try to win the bid for because when you talk about Neil Adams art, this was going to be something that people would not expect. And let's see here. I'm just in the background here. I'll be right back in a couple seconds as I remove it from the wall. Okay, coming back.
I
So,
think I know what piece you're talking about.
we'll find out here in just a second. So, when I saw that I had an opportunity to own some Neil Adams original art, people will be like, all right, did you get a Wonder Woman? Did you get a Green Lantern? You know, thinking about what big DC characters did you get of him drawing. And I don't know if anybody would guess that you'd get the M&Ms eating
Oh, awesome.
turkey legs.
Nice. You know, he has a Beetle Bailey that he did.
Oh, is that right?
That is on. I think they have it for sale. Even I'm not sure.
I either missed that or it was above my pay grade. But when I saw this, I just thought it was a great conversation piece because of like nobody would guess that this would be the item. And he had a contract with like Mars Candy, and I think he had done a bunch of art for like carnivals and fairs
Yep.
and stuff. And
Yep.
so yeah,
That's really cool.
I like the idea that this is the last thing anyone would really expect when you mention, oh, got some Neil Adams art.
I have a that I got when he was still alive, obviously. When they were doing those head sketches that he would do.
Okay.
I already had a Batman, and my fiance had gotten me a full figure Batman, so I didn't need a Batman. So I had Neil draw Underdog.
Oh,
And so I'm probably the only person that has an original Neil Adams Underdog.
that's amazing.
And that was right around the time I was working on Underdog, so it was really cool to have that and look up at it in the studio while I was working on it.
I love it.
Underdog.
Even though the
He
underdog,
is my favorite superhero.
Oh, yeah.
and even
I
though
used to
that,
really love coming across Underdog comics.
What's that?
I used to love coming across Underdog comics.
Yes, I was fortunate for a couple of years. About 5 years ago, American Mythology, the company, the publisher had the license to do it, so I got to draw Underdog for about 5 years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I did know that. And you did Three Stooges too, right?
Yes, yeah,
And it was in the style of the 60s cartoon?
yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, the last thing I have here from Matt Fife, kind of piggybacking off of the talk we just had with Neil Adams and such. Um, he asked if Matt Hansel could assemble his own Justice League book and have it written by Denny O'Neil and drawn by Jim Aparo
Oh
for,
wow.
for an extended run, he says. Matt Fife would like to know what characters are on the team. So, assembling your Justice League team with those creators.
Wow, with Denny writing and Jim drawing.
Yeah.
Um, wow. Let's see. Well, Batman, obviously.
Yeah.
I would do Batman for contrast, and because I like the way he writes him, I would have Superman, The Question, Green Arrow, Black Canary, um, Green Lantern, and Aquaman. Aquaman, and because he's mysterious, the Phantom Stranger.
Nice. Yeah, that was another one of those where I'm like, I don't think I would have been able to ask that kind of question. So I'm glad I reached out to Matt Fife to bring in his love of DC Comics there too.
Thank you.
To get back to some Underdog, I know I have some images queued up, so I'm going to jump into the share screen here. And so, with your love of Underdog, can you kind of talk about how you got that job of being able to draw them for 5 years?
Oh yeah. Well, was freelancing like we all do, and I saw it was around this time of the year that American Mythology was doing an Underdog Free Comic Book Day issue, and Underdog is the first superhero that I knew. It's the first superhero that I fell in love with. It made me want to be a cartoonist, so I knew I had to do something to move heaven and earth to try to work on that book. So I didn't know anyone in American Mythology, but I did know Bill Galvin, who is a cartoonist for Archie, and he was drawing Underdog for them because I saw his name in the credits. So I reached out, I whipped up some samples, reached out to Bill and said, I will staple the book together if that's the only job available, but I would really like to work on Underdog. Could you put me in contact with the editor maybe or something like that? And he said, I'll help you out. Don't worry. And so he did. And a few weeks later, he called me up and said that he had gotten me a coloring gig, and coloring him on Sherman and Mr. Peabody. And so I colored that, and that put me in touch then with the editor at American Mythology at the time, Mike Wolfer. And Wolfer said he would put me on the list of people that were looking for work and that they would give work to. And he knew that I wanted to work on Underdog, so if something ever came up, he would make sure that I could do that. Then it occurred to me that I had two unpublished Underdog stories from the 70s that I had bought at an auction. They were still in pencil form, so they hadn't been inked. They'd been lettered, though. And they were written by Steve Skeates, if you guys know who he is. He wrote Aquaman in the 60s for DC and worked with Steve Ditko on The Creeper and a few other projects. But he had written them, and the scripts came with the artwork. So I contacted American Mythology again and said, I've got these two unpublished Underdog stories. Would you guys be interested in publishing them? And their publisher got back to me right away and said, oh, yeah, absolutely. How much do you want for them? And I said, well, my unreasonable demand is that I get to ink and color them. And they said, okay, deal. So we submitted it to DreamWorks, and DreamWorks said, these stories are so far off model, you have to redraw them, basically. So they sent back the pages with tons of art notes. When you work on licensed characters like Underdog or anything like that, the licensor has final approval on the artwork, and on Underdog, they approved every step of the production. So they approved the script, then they approved the pencils, and they approved the inks, and they approved the colors, and they approved the lettering, and then finally you can publish it. So they, in the initial review process, said this story is too far off model. You'll have to fix it. So American Mythology asked me if I would be interested in basically repenciling and doing all of the artwork. And I said, oh, yes, of course, I can totally do it. And 2 weeks after I started doing that, Bill called me again to say that Bob Smith was leaving Underdog. He was the inker, and would I be interested in inking? And so I said, yeah. So in the same 2 week time period, I got my own Underdog book, which eventually became the Underdog 1975 special. And then I also became the inker on the main title. And then a year later, Bill had to step aside for various reasons. And they asked me if I wanted to pencil the new Underdog series that was coming out called Underdog and Pals. And I said, yeah. So I penciled and inked the first issue of that.
Who were the pals?
Tennessee Tuxedo, Commander McBragg, Tudor Turtle, those guys.
I love that. That is actually a great segue into one of the questions I had asked. For anybody who could ask Matt Hansel a question, we had Brian Lynch, our friend from Hot Wing of Justice. Brian Lynch goes, favorite Underdog villain to draw?
Oh, to draw.
Yeah.
I really like to draw Riff Raff. So I will I'll go with Riff Raff.
Yeah.
I also love Riff Raff's voice.
What was his voice like? I'm trying to remember.
He had like a New York mobster voice.
Yeah.
So it was like, hey, what's going on with this here? Huh?
Yeah.
A lot of D's and dats and disses and stuff like that.
Well, speaking about what's going on with this, let's take a look at our drawings here. Jumping over to Matt, if you want to give us a close look at your progress on this first panel.
Sure. Let me just finish this line here. Yeah. So we've got Hagar here saying, "Rejoice, the greatest warrior, the world's greatest warrior is here." I can read actually, and not just draw.
Cool. And when it comes to nailing these styles, you do a lot of warm-up sketches. We've seen the sketches posted online. Like, is there anything else that goes into research for you beyond just being a huge fan? How do you go about trying to kind of replicate or like kind of shadow a certain style?
Oh yeah.
About that?
I'll use Hagar as an example, or actually I'll use Underdog because I already did that. With Underdog, I knew they wanted everything on model, and I knew that was going to be a thing, and so I watched again for the 1,000th time every episode of Underdog. And at the time, and they might still be there, they were all available on YouTube. So I watched them all. And as I watched them, I took screen caps of Underdog poses, of buildings, of backgrounds, of trees, of cars, of people, of crowds, X-ray guns, houses, everything you could imagine. And I assembled a huge library of reference material. And when it came time to draw Underdog, I treated it like you would treat a normal comic book. So if you were drawing Batman and you had him running, you wouldn't just necessarily make up a running pose. You'd go online and you'd look for athletic running events and Olympic runners and stuff like that to get poses and anatomy and all that kind of stuff, right? You'd use photo reference to make it look authentic. And so that's what I did with Underdog, only you don't have photo reference, you have the TV show, which is reference. So everything in my Underdog comics comes from the TV show. Everything is referenced from the show so that it's as authentic as possible. And what is hilarious to me is that DreamWorks, when they did their art approvals, still made corrections on things that were from the show.
Oh yeah.
They only ever changed 2 Underdog poses that I did, but both of them were from the show, and I still can't believe that they changed them because they said they didn't look right. But I'm like, no, these are from the show. They're actually authentic.
That's awesome.
And so for Hagar, I have gone through and done the same kind of thing. There's 50 years worth of Hagar cartoons, so there's lots of opportunity to get good reference.
Nice.
Take a look at some of your Hagar work here that I pulled from the social medias just to get some other examples of.
There's a Hagar 50th anniversary hardcover collection coming out this year.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just
pre-ordered it.
Oh, cool. That's one of my favorite Hagar images I've done. Thanks for posting that. The book should be out soon because I just got an email right before Christmas from the publisher saying that they had approved the final proofs and that everything was ready to go.
Awesome.
All right, checking on some drawings. Troy, how did your drawing go there?
I threw it away.
Uh-oh.
Threw it away.
Uh-oh.
Back to the drawing board. I'm going to kind of sketch off screen, and if I can come up with something worth putting ink to, I'll get to it.
From sketching off screen to sketching on screen, D. Brad Gibson. I like your subject matter there.
Yeah. It totally.
That is very cool.
It totally shows me how my characters look a lot like Mort Walker characters, their faces.
Yeah,
'Cause that's totally how I draw cartoon character
And
faces. So,
that is not as easy to do as it looks.
yeah, but that's like I have a cartoon character that has a face like that. So, but what I did is I got I don't know if you can see it here. This one here, he's going rough, rough, but then I just kind of changed the angle.
Ah, cool.
awesome.
So it's more 3/4.
All right, then.
And
Yep.
and I'm inking it, so I won't get as many pictures done today because inking it takes slower.
Yeah. Checking in on mine here. I've got my Charles Schultz inspired Beetle Bailey style there. So a Peanuts
Nice.
Beetle Bailey, if you will. And then I've got the Ziggy style so far. Once I kind of lay down the initial outlines, I'm going to go in and kind of really study the reference to try to get some of the inking lines and just try my best to mimic as much as I can. And then a
Mhm.
Calvin and Hobbes, I decided to keep. I kind of like how the Hobbes he kind of looks like a construction worker. He almost looks like a tall doozer from Fred there. But uh,
Yeah.
decided instead of making him an animal, I used some of the fur that would normally be off of Hobbs' face and just made that the under hair that we see Beetle under his cap a little bit. But he turned out more of a doozer than I expected him to do, but that works as long as he's next to Calvin there. I think that'll be fine. And then I don't really know what's going on with Dennis so far. I just started that one, but we'll see what happens.
I
I think
think
I'm
they
just
all look great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I made the top ones extra large, so it's weird drawing Dennis really big next to, bigger than all these other kid characters and small characters. So I'm just a little disoriented right now, just seeing a giant Dennis the Menace. But okay, so that is that round there. Let me jump over to, we're going to go back to some questions here. Let me just get back so I don't miss anything here. Talking about Sunday comic strips. Um, Before we get Matt's answer here, I reached out to somebody here, and Lavi, past guest here, Lavi HQ. I asked fond memories reading newspaper comics, and she responded, "Getting up on Sunday to grab them before my siblings do." Um, yeah, basically a race to that. So if Matt, if you kind of want to talk about what kind of importance the comic strips beyond what you've said, if there's anything else to talk about growing up and just how important that was. Like, were you a big comic book reader in general, or is it comic strips? Can you kind of just talk about your reading aspect on that front?
Sure. Um, I read both. There wasn't a comic book store near me, so that didn't happen as frequently as I would like. But there was the daily newspaper comics that I could read, and so that kind of scratched the itch for that. The newspaper comics, though, really were important to me because as a young guy reading them, when I decided I wanted to be a cartoonist and announced that one day to my parents, uh, they were probably horrified. What did we do wrong that he wants to draw funny pictures for a living? But my dad went upstairs and got a book out of his study and brought it downstairs and said, "All right, if you want to be a cartoonist, that's fine. But if you want to be good, you need to be as good as this guy." And the book he brought down was called Willie and Joe, which was done by Bill Maudlin, who was an editorial cartoonist for the Sun Times for many years here in Chicago, but was also a World War II cartoonist for Stars and Stripes with a comic strip called, I'll think of it in a second, but his comic strip was about two soldiers in World War II, and all the adventures they went through. So he gave me that book and then said, be as good as this. So Bill Maudlin has always been a guy that I've wanted to be as good as because I want to impress my dad.
That's a totally different style than Beetle Bailey.
Yes. Willie and Joe. That's the name of the strip.
That's what you said, Willie and Joe.
Yeah, Willie and Joe. I
Yeah.
don't know why I lost it and then couldn't remember it.
Okay, I thought you were trying to think of a different one.
Oh yeah, no. I was trying to think of that one.
Yeah. Because you did already say it, so you
So
did
yeah,
get it.
talking about reading both, is there anything from like mainstream comic books, whether it's superhero or independent stuff? Can you kind of talk about
Oh yeah,
strip stuff here?
I we used to go on Sundays when I was little, antiquing, so that my mom and dad could get stuff for the house. And one day we were out. We were actually at a flea market, and I found an issue of something called Batman and the Outsiders.
Oh yeah.
And I thought, wow, what is this? And I opened it up. It was issue 3.
Okay.
And with a guy who had an orange mask and was a nuclear problem or something like that. But it was Batman with all these people I'd never heard of, Catania, Geoforce, and Black Lightning, and Metamorpho, and all that stuff. And I picked it up, and it had that wonderful Jim Aparo artwork, written by Mike Barr, and I just instantly fell in love. And that was the beginning of my love affair with comic books. Was that issue of Batman and the Outsiders?
Nice.
Yeah, one thing that I talk about when I host the Crimson Cowl Comic Club, available on YouTube, and whenever we bring in a creator guest, do a guest interview, that's one of the best questions I ask. Is kind of like, all right, what are your favorite characters? What books do you read? I think you can find a lot about somebody right away just by going to that topic, and it's always fun just to kind of like, all right, this person's into this person's into that. So that's my kind of topics when it comes to like social engagements, rather than like oh, how's the weather going, or what this or that. It's just like, what comic books do you read?
That you're not wrong. You can definitely tell.
Good conversation starter. All right, Troy, we see your screen back up here, so we're seeing the magic happen.
I couldn't get Grimmy down, so I'm drawing Steve Pastis. I think I'm saying his name right. The cartoonist of Pearls Before Swine. He has
Oh, yeah.
himself as a character in a lot of his comics,
Oh yeah.
and I think he draws himself really funny. So I really don't know what I'm doing here tonight, guys. It just
None of us really know what we're doing, so it's okay.
Yeah, that the dentist that I end up drawing just looks like he's wearing clothes that don't fit him. So that I'm just gonna pretend that was on purpose. I think that was just my lack of penciling out what I wanted to do there. But I'm very happy with the bottom row there, at least. All right, so I've got some more stuff to show on the share screen. So what I want to do here is learn more about Matt Hansel and your artistic ability and your interest in creating, and when all that came to be. So what's going to happen is that I am going to show a bunch of images. You don't necessarily need to comment on them, but it'll be a little slideshow as you kind of talk about the artistic origins of Matt Hansel.
Oh, sure.
So feel free to jump in, and I'm just going to have some share screen stuff in the background.
My artistic origins, my initial influences were, there's one of them, Jeff McNally. Jeff McNally and Dick Loker, both from the Chicago Tribune. Dick did Dick Tracy for 30 years, and McNally, of course, created Shoe and was a Pulitzer Prize editorial cartoonist as well. So was Dick. But both of them, I considered them both Chicago cartoonists, and both of them, I became friends with Dick later in life. And so both of them had just a tremendous influence on me in terms of style, using a brush, placing blacks, doing good lettering, the whole thing. Because both of them did everything on their own. They did their lettering, their coloring, the inking, the whole thing. And so that's an initial huge one is our McNelly and Loker. On the comic book side, around that era would be Neil Adams and also Jim Aparo. Both of them just tremendous influences on me. I was fortunate that for about 4 years I had a pen pal friendship with Jim. And even more fortunate later in life to get to know Neil. So that was really cool. That drawing that you have on there is based on a Chris Brown drawing. Chris is a big influence of mine. He, of course, took over Hagar after his dad died. And so that he used to like to draw dragons. So one day I woke up and said, I wonder if I can draw a Chris Brownish dragon. And that was my attempt at doing so.
Love it.
And kind of a homage to the fact that Chris is also one of my big influences.
Yeah, what I kind of like about like going through your art and finding things to show off, looking for a lot of, comic strip related stuff, but also finding you do a lot of superhero work and like your style, like it's very versatile, very much like what you want to draw. Like this one here, it's now like you're drawing, like let's say how to describe it, like saying like a Matt Hansel, like Batman and Robin, like drawn.
Yeah.
It's just like you kind of flirt with a bunch of different styles. I don't know if you can kind of talk about what you like about stretching your artistic ability.
I think the thing I fear most as an artist is stagnation. Getting stuck in a rut and just doing the same thing on autopilot, basically. So I work in a lot of different styles. You saw that I had done that was a Dick Sprang kind of Batman. Here's Rocky and Bullwinkle. I enjoy working in a lot of different styles, and part of the reason I do that, especially with styles like Dick Sprang and the Hagar stuff, and even now the Neil Adams stuff, is that I think it's important to preserve those guys' artistic legacies. Dick Brown was a tremendous cartoonist on top of just having Hagar. He co-created High and Lois with Mort Walker, which is a huge strip even to this day. And so that, and even Mort's stuff needs to be preserved so that future generations can really enjoy it and look at it, and it'll still be relevant to them. It won't just be like Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox. Everyone knows who that is, but no one cares about him because nobody's done anything with them. And so carrying on those artistic legacies is really important to me, which is one of the reasons why I try to work so authentically all the time.
And had a recent stretch of kind of always try to find like some musician art from some of our guests, going through what you would normally see superhero work and things like, what you would expect being comic book stuff. So I'm always delighted when I see artists drawing musicians. So.
Oh, yeah. Jerry Garcia, on top of being one of my favorite musicians, my future father-in-law is also a huge fan. So that particular Jerry Garcia drawing there was a Christmas present for him one year.
Oh. That's awesome. And I could see some of the, because I think you've drawn Santa Claus. I've seen some drawings of that. So
yes.
Not too far off there, but, both are great.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see here. Going through the share screen, making sure everything that I have. Here's one thing that you had sent to me. I'm not familiar with what we're looking at here with Township.
Oh, Township. Yes. Township is something I wanted to talk about a little bit. Township is a comic strip that I do with my friend Jeff Kirsten. It is I don't want to say it's an homage to Dick Tracy because that's not really what it is. It's hugely influenced by Dick Tracy, but it's really carrying on the story of what Chester Gould was actually talking about in Dick Tracy, which was about justice and the dangerous intersection of corporate interests, the military industrial complex, and the government. And so Township is our continuation of that kind of story. So it's about an attorney named Jed Keene who his wife is murdered and he has to go and find out who did it. And it turns out that there's a huge conspiracy. And I don't want to say too much else because it'll give the story away. But that's what it is. We do it as a daily comic strip. You can read it at townshipcomicstrip.com. And the next story will start in March. Monday, we're starting a series of interim stories, and then in March, the next big story starts.
Very cool.
Sounds subversive. I like it.
It is. That's why I love it so much.
All right, going through my online stuff. I think I pulled everything I needed to from there. Now, kind of talking about working on your own comic strips and things like that, I think is a great segue into another topic that I queued up with a couple images. This is something that I am very excited to hear about. I don't know much about, and I'm excited to learn more because we are talking about Marty and Spud.
Ah, yes, Marty and Spud. Thank you for showing them. Marty and Spud is my creator-owned comic that started off about 15 years ago as a web comic at Go Comics, and now is a series of graphic novels and things like that. And there will be new material coming out next year. I need to produce it, which I'm going to do this year. But Marty and Spud is near and dear to my heart. It's a lot of people think it's Calvin and Hobbes, and that's certainly a little part of it. But it's based on an old comic strip called Dickie Dare. And Dickie Dare was drawn by Milton Caniff before he started doing Terry and the Pirates. And the premise of Dickie Dare was that Dickie and his dog would be sitting around reading, Robinson Crusoe or The Scarlet Pimpernel or something like that. And he would fall asleep and wake up in the novel. So Marty and Spud takes a cue from that, only it's, the modern times. So Marty has a huge imagination, so he wants to be Han Solo and Indiana Jones and Batman and all kinds of other people. So he's about 8 years old, and Marty and Spud is about him and his cat, Spud, who's a real cat, and the adventures that they go off on and what they do and all that kind of stuff. And they're right now being published through an outfit called A Kid and a Comic, which is a newspaper that comes out 7 times a year, and it's geared solely for kids.
Oh, cool!
So it's got Marty and Spud. It's got all kinds of good comic strips in it.
That's
and
fun.
then, do you have anything with you have a Patreon page? Is there anything that you see that stuff on there? Is that a separate thing? Can you talk about
my Patreon's on hold right now.
Yeah.
But that is where I'm going to debut some of the new Marty and Spud material. Yes.
Cool. All right. So there's some other show and tell that I wanted to get not only with the share screen stuff, but with some physical stuff as well to make sure I don't miss anything. Sometimes when we're doing these episodes and hanging out and drawing, and then I realize we're all having fun and talking and drawing, and then I'm like, oh, shoot, I got to get through this stuff really quick. So I've been doing that ahead of time to make sure, because having Matt Hansel on, I was excited to have all of this discussion, show off all this cool stuff. And it started when I saw you at a MightyCon show in Milwaukee a couple years ago. And it might have been one of the early shows back after, the shutdown years and stuff like that. And,
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, and coming across your table, I think you were fairly close to Rich Koslowski from
Yes.
Comics and
I was.
Sonic, and I remember just going next. I wasn't familiar with your work, and I'm flipping through, and I was going through your original artwork, and I saw this piece. And anytime I go through artwork, I definitely like to get a lot of the same thing, seeing different people's take on a character I love, but then when I have so much stuff of the same thing, it really stands out when I see something that I don't have, and that being Legend of Zelda. So here's a piece that I bought from you from some Legend of Zelda art,
I remember that. Yes.
and it's one of those things where I was mentally going through my collection, being like, "Oh, I don't have anything Zelda related for art," and I'm like, "All right, this is perfect," and that's what kind of led me to discovering who you are and going into your work and stuff like that. So that is
That Zelda piece was one of my daily doodles that I do.
ooh,
I had been talking, I remember doing it. I had been talking to a friend the day before about stuff, and he is a huge Zelda fan. And at the time, the art of the Legend of Zelda book had just come out at Dark Horse, and he had gotten it and showed it to me, and it was really cool. So I thought, for my daily doodle, why not do Zelda?
there we go. And some people might be
Oh, I
questioning.
just realized.
Uh,
I was going to say, I just realized I wasn't on screen drawing.
okay.
It was off.
That's right. Sometimes the magic has to happen, and we just have to anticipate when we get allowed to see it again. Troy was probably wondering, being like, "Hey, you went through all that stuff. How come we didn't see any Beetle Bailey artwork from Matt Hansel?" Well, that's because I had another physical art piece here that Beetle Bailey World of Characters. I had talked about your what inspired me working on a collage of warm up sketches and things like that. I had seen this piece here, and I had to make sure it became mine with the purchase. It's covering up my face. I got to see if it's okay. Here we go. So,
Oh, the Sarge piece. Yeah.
yeah, a world of Sarge. Now, an entire just awesome collage of just all of the Sarge poses. Now, can you talk about what leads you to do this kind of stuff and just do like, I'm going to do an 11 by 17 of just Sarge? Are you looking for practice on this character specifically or poses in general and you just chose Sarge? Can you kind of talk about why you do these giant warm-up sketches?
Yeah, that is. I actually did that because that's how long I've been thinking about doing the Beetle Bailey samples. I that is my model sheet for Sarge. So all of those images are based on images that appeared either in the comic strip or I have a bunch of issues of the Beetle Bailey comic book. And they might have happened in that. But I do that to exactly for the reason that you said, to kind of get familiar with the character, to warm up to them, to figure out what I'm going to do with them, to learn their kind of idiosyncrasies and, if they have specific body language or things like that. And so that becomes part of the process. And when you do that, of course, then you also get a fun piece of original art for people to be able to want to purchase, hopefully.
Yeah, and this is a prime example of a favorite video I love hearing Mort talk about. He had talked about the snaggletooth of Sarge here, and talking about how it's basically always kind of shifting around his mouth, and like depending on what angle you'd see him at, that single tooth happens to just appear in different spots.
Oh, it does.
And that's what happens here. Like looking at the drawing, whether it's on the bottom or the top or sticking out this way or that way. He had just kind of talked about that, and that's just one of my favorite little jokes to look around. And just notice that, kind of like the
Whatever.
Robin Hood Men in Tights with what's his face with the mole that kept kind of moving around his face.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
right. Yeah. The
Um,
Prince?
yeah.
John? Character?
And so like when hearing Mort talk
Yeah.
about that tooth kind of going wherever it needed to be for the drawing, that just brought a lot of humor to me, and now anytime I read any Beetle Bailey comics, I'm very aware of the location of that snaggletooth. So
Where it goes.
uh,
Did you know? I think they still do it. I haven't paid that close of attention to the frequency of it though. But it used to be in Beetle Bailey that on Wednesdays was always the day that Miss Buxley appeared.
Oh, really?
Is that pattern still true? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that, but now that's going to be another thing I'm going to have to be
I used
aware of.
to, I used to, I used to have well, favorite comic strips that I would cut out and then put into like a scrapbook,
Oh,
and I had like a Miss Buxley collection. So
oh, that's cool.
every time she appeared, I had them all all glued together in a little book.
Now, that is a great segue to something that I wish I had the show and tell for, but today, literally today, I found this information was brought to me again, talking with my aunt and realizing and remembering she had told me that my grandpa, her father, late father, had he had cut out a lot of the comic strips growing up. You know, he lived a long life. He had passed in the late 90s, and that he would scrapbook them, put them in journals, and all these comic strips that I never knew about this. She had told me like maybe a year ago, and then the topic kind of randomly came up today, and then very coincidentally, unrelated to today would have been his birthday at the time of this
Oh,
recording. So I reached out to my brother, who has a lot of the family history and stuff like that, and I'm like, "Is it true that Grandpa had some comic strips that he had cut out and put in journals and scrapbooks?" And immediately, without like checking, he's just like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "They're in there. I'll dig them out." And I don't know if that means like I'll dig them out and now I'm going to be in possession, or if I just get to look at it. And this all just happened, a couple hours prior to our recording. So I have
Wow.
that to look forward to kind of see what my grandpa, who lived, well into his, mid to late 80s, I think, to see what kind of comic strips that he cut out. And maybe it's all Miss Buxley, maybe him and D. Brad had a common.
I was gonna say, wouldn't that be wild if it was just like Miss Buxley and Blondie? The
that's
occasional,
hilarious.
the occasional Dennis the Menace, where Mrs. Menace shows up. Miss Mitchell.
Mitchell, which is perfect, talking about the original, the Dennis the Menace movie, the '90s one with Leah Thompson as Mrs. Mitchell, and just so I can
Oh,
definitely.
that's right. She was.
Mhm.
I think we had talked about this in our first round, and maybe if I remember, the question is like for Matt here, and anybody else can answer. Maybe they have different answers or forget what they said, but if there was a live action adaptation of a comic strip that either maybe one's come out and you want to see a better take on it, or is there anything that pops into your mind that you think would service as a live action adaptation, or do you think it has to be animated?
I prefer
Uh,
an Yeah, I like them animated. Unless it's like a strip that I guess like Blondie and Dagwood, that was a movie series in the like in the 40s, and then it was a TV show too in the 50s or 60s with live action people, and I've seen some of those, and that worked because it was kind of like had a basis in real life. Yeah, so I think it's like when they have characters that don't work in real life. I prefer to see a cartoon version of it. Like I wouldn't like have like a real. Uh, uh, I guess they did do it. Did they do a real version? No, they've never done a real version of. Or if they do, I guess they did do an underdog one, and it had a real dog.
yes.
It had a real
Yeah.
dog in it.
And I was friends with Joe Harris, the guy that co-created Underdog,
Yeah.
and he and I had of course, pen palship. And
Yeah.
when the movie came out, he told me it is the worst movie he's ever seen, but he's still going to cash the check.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like it. What I would like if they like, I know sometimes they do computer animated versions. That could have worked better for Underdog.
Yes. Have you guys seen the
Hmm.
on Apple TV? They have 2 or 3 Peanuts specials.
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
They are fantastic,
They are.
and
Yeah.
they underdog would totally work in a style like that.
Yeah.
I think that would look fantastic. I think Hagar would look fantastic that way too.
Yeah, yeah. Keep it 2D, but it's got like and
But a
it's
3D kind of
easier.
feel.
And the coloring's got like shading and the backgrounds look like watercolor even.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I saw the Franklin one and the Marcy
Yeah,
one.
yes.
I was just
Mhm.
going to comment that I really love that Franklin one, and it's just
Mhm.
really felt like it captured the spirit. And
It sure did, yeah.
Yeah,
anything,
they really did a phenomenal job with it.
Mhm.
Troy, anything that you can think of oh, I say that, and then all of a sudden the screen went to black there. Maybe he's got to step out to the side. Let's see here. Okay, so Matt had sent over a couple other images here, a lot of sketch cover work and stuff. So stuff that you specifically sent to me. If there's anything, if you want to talk about, once again, kind of going after a specific style and being influenced, but when it comes to comic book sketch covers, do you lean into what the person asking for the commission or the specific title of the book that you're doing, or do you kind of talk about how do you approach a blank sketch cover variant as I show off some of this super
Sure.
stuff?
I used to be obsessed with it. The character had to match up with the title, and it had to be the appropriate. Like if it was a specific, like the Superman Unchained, they had the 52 Superman costume for that, if I remember correctly.
Right.
And if I would have done this a few years ago, I would have made sure it was the appropriate costume and all that kind of stuff. But as the last couple months, as I've started just doing some to have in my portfolio for shows and things like that, I've just been going with classic versions of the characters. Mostly because those are the most fun versions to draw. um, but it's a lot of fun doing sketch covers. The paper that the sketch covers are made out of, some of them drives me crazy
Yeah.
because it doesn't take ink well, or it doesn't erase, or
Oh, no.
whatever. But most of the DC ones are pretty good.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that we're showing here kind of once again goes into what I was talking about, where like you could look at some of these superhero covers and then be like, wait, that's the same guy that was drawing, Hagar. like, like I just love that how versatile and different that can be. So
One of my influences in that kind of schizophrenic, doing funny cartoon stuff, but also doing more realistic stuff. Do you guys know who Stan Drake is?
Yeah.
Stan did
I
the
do,
Heart of
yeah.
Juliet. Yeah, he did the Heart of Juliet Jones, which was
Yeah,
a
I just
very.
started reading that on Facebook. There's a fella who started printing them from.
Oh, did he? Oh, cool.
Yeah, he's the
Uh,
same guy. He also has does the Leonard Starr group.
oh, yeah. Okay, I didn't know he
Yeah,
was doing Juliet Jones. I'll have to
yeah,
join that. I'll have to
yeah.
check that out. Um, but Stan also drew later on in his career Blondie,
Oh,
and was the Blondie artist for many, many, many years.
that's right.
So the idea that you can do both, to me, seems normal.
Well, Mike Manley, he's really good at drawing real and cartoon.
Yes, yes, he is. Mike's one of my favorite guys. I actually reached out to him with a business question a little while ago, a couple weeks ago. But yeah, he definitely can pull that off as well.
all right, I think I have one more in this specific lineup here.
I can totally see your Neil Adams influence
Thank you.
with the lines. Dun, dun, dun.
So that does it for that lineup there. Troy, is there anything that you can think of like what you'd want to see, like a comic book, comic strip adaptation, something that deserves more attention? anything a modern take on it or anything?
I don't know about live action, but maybe like a CGI, like the Peanuts movie was done.
Yeah.
Um, I liked that Peanuts movie that came out a few years ago.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Hmm,
Well, well. Otherwise, if you can't think of
even
anything, I may have mentioned this the first time, but I had talked about live action Beetle Bailey. I think I had mentioned that DJ Qualls, who was in the road trip movie, I think he would have been a great Beetle Bailey, and
yeah.
I could just kind of see that, and I think of that because I had to pull this out too, kind of talking about being influenced and mimicking styles. I had done this 2 years ago now, where I want, much like how I'm doing with my drawings here of doing Beetle is a bunch of different cartoonist styles. This was my take on Beetle Bailey in a Scotty Young style, and I was very happy with how this one turned out. Um,
Mhm.
just like looking at like how he just draws, like just everything that he does is just amazing, and
Yes, it is.
I'm going to try to draw like him for one time. And one of the things was just given those bulging kneecaps, which I just love that little that little detail there, and I thought that was appropriate for Beetle in this scenario.
Kind of looks like DJ Qualls too.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
This is one of the things where a lot of the stuff that I draw just goes in a portfolio and will go on the artist table, but this one's staying with me forever, and I'm never letting that one go. So,
That one's a keeper.
yep, pretty much. All right, let's check in with some drawings again. While we had gone through, it looks like you had reached your third panel there. But Matt, if you want to give us a closer look when you're ready, unless you're in the
Yeah.
middle of something
No,
important.
we can. We've got panel 2 is underway here, so I'll hold it this way, maybe. So after Rejoice, the world's greatest warrior is here, then poor Hagar is dejected because Helga says, wipe your feet and wash your hands, dinner is ready. So we are in the process of inking up that. We've got Hagar mostly done, and we're working on Helga right now.
And this is an original gag, I believe, correct?
Yeah, I wrote this one, penciled it out this afternoon so I could have it to ink here.
Nice.
Uh,
You saw it here first.
And normally, I'm not one to ask a lot of technical questions. I've been very public with saying like I don't really know much about like art supplies and things like that. Like we'll use Sharpies when Rogers and Troy and D. Brad are talking about brushes and brands and stuff like that. Can you talk about at least what goes into this piece, like how you approach whether it be ink and all the materials that goes into designing stuff like this?
Sure.
Preferences and recommendations, or things that maybe you're asking for tips, and if anybody has any good tips, whatever
Yeah,
you want to say
I'm
on.
always interested in what people work with, what tools they're using.
Hey
For
guys, I'm sorry, real quick. I keep getting called out. I'm gonna have to go, guys. It was really good meeting you, Matt.
it was
Well,
nice to meet you too.
Other guys, it's Brad, Anthony. Good seeing you guys as always. I'll check up with you guys later.
All
Have a
right.
good rest of the show, guys.
good
See ya.
hanging out. Take it easy. All right. So yeah, anything you want to give us? And what's funny is that I brought that up because I know Troy loves asking about that a lot. So this will give him a good excuse to watch our episode because he'll need to figure out your answer to what you're about
There
to.
you go. For this strip, I mostly ink with steel nibs. So this particular one is a Gillette 170, and that's the same pen point that Dick Brown used when he worked on the strip, that Chris used when he worked on the strip, and their longtime inker Dick Hodgins, that's what he used. So I ink almost everything with that. For detail work and just little noodling and things like that, I use a Hunt 107. to do that. And then for filling in black areas and things like that, I just have a cheap Spectre Gold Winsor & Newton watercolor brush. Doing the lettering.
What kind of paper are you doing it on?
This is Canson XL Bristol board.
Oh, that's what I have.
It is the closest to what Strathmore used to be that I have ever found.
Yeah.
Strathmore nowadays bleeds. It just is not what it used to be.
Yeah.
And then to do the lettering, I have a variety of speedball nibs: the B6, the B5, the A5, and the C5.
Do you dip it? Dip it?
I just got bingo after you said all that.
And are those dipping pens then?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I dip it in here. Let me get the bottle here.
And with me not knowing much about anything, are these supplies different than how you approach your Neil Adams inspired realistic stuff?
A little bit, and I can talk about those in a second. I just wanted to show the ink that I use. It's called Platinum Carbon ink. And it's really black. It takes erasing well. It's a Japanese ink. It's basically Japanese India ink. And that I learned about from Sergio Aragonés and Stan Sakai.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I ink the Neil Adams pieces, I ink most of them with a Kurtaki brush pen, this darker blue one. I also will use occasionally this greener looking one, which is the same thing. It's another Kurtaki. The dark blue one is a soft tip, and the green one is a harder tip. And then one of Neil's favorite tools to use for almost anything was the Pentel disposable fountain pen, or they're now called the Pentel Stylo. But I use that for about 90% of the line work that I do when I do the Neil Adams pieces. And then to fill in the big areas, just a Faber-Castell Pitt pen, the big brush is what they call it.
Got it.
And then just for small little details and things, a .01 and a .03 pen.
Nice.
And one thing, once again, with me being very ignorant on what supplies are and brands and stuff, there's one memory that always sticks out with Jimmy Palmiotti. I think it talked about a certain nib that he liked to use, and knowing that it was discontinued and he just bought a crap ton of it. Is there any story that you have that's interesting of like if you get used to a certain utensil or ink or something where you just had to stockpile it because you didn't want it to go away? Like, do you have any kind of story related on that other cartoonists would be geeking over right now?
Yeah, I actually these even though they're popularly available, these Japanese Kurtaki pens, I'm afraid they're going to stop making them, or that we're not going to be able to import them or something like that. So I every time I order them in like groups of 20 so that I have a bunch to use and a bunch to hang on to. And actually that reminds me I need to order some more.
Yeah,
Stan Sakai, the pen that he uses to ink Usagi Yojimbo with, they don't make it anymore. They haven't made it for 30 years. And when they discontinued it I think it was in the 90s, it might have been the late 80s, but I think it was the 90s. He went through all of Southern California and bought out every pen that he could find.
Oh, wow.
And he said he's got enough of them now to last him the rest of his career.
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna say there should be like a national message that goes out on television or something and radios of just saying, all right, all of this just goes to Stan Sakai. Like everyone has to just collectively agree that okay, he gets all of them now because we have to.
He gets all of them. Exactly.
Like he has enough of a established career where everyone just has to understand, being like, okay, let's all help him out and get him all of the resources he needs to keep doing what he's doing.
Well, that happened with Charles Schultz. The pen nib that he liked to use, they discontinued. The Esterbrook Radio 914, and he bought out the company. He called the company up when they said they were not going to make them anymore, and bought out their entire supply.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think when the reason I brought up that topic, if I can kind of relate to that, like thinking about something that you're attached to and you really want, and knowing that it's going to go away, that you just kind of stockpile it. The thing that I always immediately go to is Pitch Black Mountain Dew, that grape Mountain Dew soda that was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a long way just to mention a joke like that. Anyways, back to comics. You had mentioned Sergio and Stan, and I had very recently read for the first time Space Circus.
Oh yes.
Oh, yeah?
And
did you get the fancy trade paper or hardcover that they just did?
Yep. What I have
so did I.
Yeah, I saw this in the previews on the Crimson Cowl Comic Club. We'll go through previews catalogs, and I saw this listed, and I had publicly said, just saying, I'm the genre that Sergio had worked with, and I never was. That wasn't my kind of genre with his work, and then all of a sudden I saw Space Circus, and I was just like, oh, this sounds fun, and this maybe is my introduction into his work, and I devoured this, and now I want to go.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, this is just beautiful work, and the name dropped.
Can you show it?
What's that?
Can you show it?
Oh,
I
yeah.
see it.
Yep, I'll show it. And the name just dropped off my head, but what's the number one thing he's known for? The
Gru.
Grooves, yeah. I kept thinking
And Mad Magazine.
And Mad Magazine, of course. Right.
Yeah. So Gru is the name just dropped from my head. So Gru is something I'm going to show off an awesome double splash page here. So Gru is the thing that is not necessarily my go-to genre. And after reading Space Circus, I'm now just in love with what he did here, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to devour some Gru. But here's an awesome double splash page where just like, it's like a Where's Waldo type of thing of just there's so much going on, and like every character has something to do, and like,
oh wow,
this I devoured this, and I just giving a glowing review on one of the recent Crimson Cowl comic clubs, and but this book is absolutely hilarious and kind of taking that a newspaper style drawings and gags, but this happens for like 100 pages or so, and
Nice.
Yeah,
Mark, I think I have it right. Mark Evanier once said that when you're writing Gru or Space Circus or Mighty Mango or any of the other strips that they did, you have to just remember every page is basically a daily strip.
Yeah.
And when I thought about that, I'm like, so if you do every page as a gag and then kind of loosely connect them together with a continuity, all of a sudden you'll have a story.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening, especially in this stuff, and I'm excited to check out Gru proper now. But
Cool.
excellent. But yeah, you had mentioned Sergio a couple times there, so I knew I'm like, oh, I got to mention that.
Yes, I love Sergio. I've been fortunate enough to meet him a bunch of times.
Oh, nice.
I get to chat with him every once in a while at a National Cartoonist Society hangout when we do them, and I also have 3 pieces of original art from him, so that is really cool. And if I reach right here, I have the same kind of fountain pens that Sergio uses to ink Gru.
Ooh.
The what are they called? The Pelican M200.
Pelican. That's the brand.
Yeah, that's the brand of fountain pen that he uses.
You gave me a perfect segue into literally my next topic, because you had mentioned the National Cartoonist Society. And,
Yeah.
Not Pelicans.
No, not Pelican. But a society, a group that was formed in the mid-40s, I believe. And can you kind of talk about how you became a member and what that entails, and everything related to the National Cartoonist Society in your experience?
Sure. If you are a cartoonist, you should seriously think about joining the NCS. It is it's a fraternal organization of cartoonists, men and women, and they support each other. It's a great way to share information. It's a great way just to hang out with, because as cartoonists, we lead isolated lives sometimes. So it's a great way to go hang out with people and get to know your fellow ink slingers and find out what kind of tools people are using and all that kind of fun stuff. I got involved with our local chapter, the NCS, about 15 years ago. And then 3 or 4 years ago, I think it's 4 years ago now, I decided at the encouragement of some other people to join the NCS as a full-blown member. I didn't think they would accept me, but they did. And so I have been for 3 or 4 years now a full-blown member of the NCS. And just today, I was elected the vice president of the Chicago chapter.
Oh, congratulations. Awesome.
Thank you.
And from what I know, from the little that I know, rather, like whenever the NCS has like a convention presence, it's basically a good situation to be like, all right, here's the cartoonist, kind of like everybody sitting together. Can you kind of talk about that experience of like the collaboration and just kind of meeting other people in those convention settings and what the NCS brings to that?
Oh yeah. I was very fortunate last year. NCS set up at C2E2, and so I was able to uh, get table space at the Cartoonist Society booth, and it was great. I got to meet George Gant, who is a Chicago cartoonist that does a strip called Beware of Toddler, that's published by King Features. He is a phenomenal cartoonist, and I probably would not have met him in real life had it not been for that convention. I also got to meet Dee Fish, who is a phenomenal cartoonist. If you think I can work in a bunch of styles, you should talk to Dee Fish. She can work in every style imaginable, from Charles Schultz to Mike Mignola. I mean, it's just crazy. But I got to meet her, and she was actually nominated for a Reuben. While we were sitting there, I happened to check my email and I said, "Oh, the Reuben nominations are out." And I looked and I said, "Hey, Dee, you were nominated."
Well, you had mentioned George Gant, and I knew the name was familiar because I had mentioned Brian Lynch from Hot Wing of Justice. He has his own little like daily cartoon strips that he does with his characters, and
Yeah.
he had come out with this Project Pumpkin book in which he has this crazy pumpkin character that he reached out to a bunch of artists and contributed to. So I actually have, because this is officially the first time that I had a published pinup of anything in a book, and George Gant's in here as well. So
Oh, cool.
I feel
Wow.
extra special to just have my name in that book. I'm gonna look quick on where his is here, page 15, so I can just kind of show that off so you can kind of see what's going on with this work here. Just give me a moment. All right. That looks like a Jamie Cosley there, so I think this is page 15. I don't know if that style looks familiar there.
That looks like it. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Nice.
there's what George Gant came up with
That's really cool.
Yeah, I love
Brian
it.
Lynch's Harold with his Hot Wing of Justice and Jokin the Pumpkin there. But yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, you mentioned that name. I'm like, I know that name, and I feel weird that I have my name is in a book with him. So
You have shared space.
very cool. All right.
That's one of the great things about comics is the spirit of collaboration.
Yeah.
All right. So what we're going to do here, we're going to wind down our episode. It was fun to learn about Matt and learn more about newspaper comic strips and see that. What we're going to do, actually, let's do the plugs first. So Matt, if people wanted to follow you on the social media, where would they reach out to you at?
You can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and Blue Sky under Matthew Hansel. And I think those are the only social medias I'm on at the moment.
And all the official handles and links and information will be put along the bottom for people to get the direct links, as well in the show notes where people could just click and follow you right away.
Oh, cool.
And this is the beginning of this January 2025 as we're closing out the month. Do you have any convention public appearances and stuff that are relevant, or is it too early to kind of talk about?
No, actually, I have a bunch of them.
Oh, cool.
I will be February 15th. I will be at the Northwest Indiana Comic Con in Crown Point, Indiana. That is in its 11th year or 10th year. I can't remember. But I know the show organizer. I went to high school with him. So it's always good to know that. So I'm doing that. And then in March, the 14th, 15th, and 16th, I will be in Indianapolis for the Indiana Comic Con. And I have a table there. And then in April at C2E2, I will be with the National Cartoonist Society. And in May, I will be at Graham Crackers Comics on Free Comic Book Day. And in June, I will be in Muncie, Indiana for the Muncie, Indiana Comic Con. And that's as far as I've plotted out so far.
Oh, that's awesome. So, yeah, looks like you're covering a lot of the Midwest there for anybody who is
trying to.
Yeah. And who would want to reach out to Matt, follow him, and also see him in person and check out that art. And speaking about checking out that art, we'll start with D. Brad, just because I saw Matt just going some details. So let's go over to D. Brad first here, kind of showing off what you did here this evening.
Oh, okay. This one I'm just finishing off a Batgirl one I did way back when we had a Batgirl episode.
Yeah.
Batman episode.
Oh, very nice.
And then
very nice.
Last week, this was one I didn't get to, but I had the structure for it. But I'm still working on getting the camera right with details, so I didn't want to do too much on that. But that's from the Ninja Turtles, April again. And then
that's very nice too.
And then for our comics,
that is awesome.
with my auto,
love it.
But it's weird because I draw off in an angle, and so when I bring it up, I look at it and go, oh, it looks different than it does down here. This arm I probably would have made a bit shorter, but it probably still works.
It's great. It's great expression work there.
Yeah,
Cool.
I like the tone work too.
I just find it funny how Mort Walker has influenced me so much because that face looks like
it really does. You totally nailed it. It really does.
I mean, I have a character who has that face.
Well, there you go.
I had one since grade 4.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see more of that. D. Brad, keep working on that stuff. We need some D. Brad comics out there.
Yeah.
So I started adding some thicker lines and stuff, but I'll show off these ones here from my Beetle Baileys with some Peanuts and Ziggy and Calvin and Hobbes. But when I
looking good,
when I get to the final one, I'll start putting a little bit of color in there and kind of refine some stuff. But
who's the top one?
So yeah, I guess so. This is
Dennis. Okay.
In the oversized suit. So I'm pretending that's actual Dennis in a actual Beetle Bailey suit, just because I didn't prepare enough for that one, and I didn't get too far on the Hagar because I didn't want to give Beetle a beard, so I wanted to try to figure out how that would look there, but I didn't get too far on that one there. But I like these ones a little more, just kind of doodling and practicing and just trying to once again be inspired.
That's a good idea.
Matt Hansel.
They look really great.
Thank you. And now let's take a look at the status of Matt Hansel's Hagar original.
It is 99% done. There is just a little bit of noodling to do here in the background and a little texture on Helga's helmet, and Hagar's too. But otherwise, it's pretty much done.
Right on.
So rejoice, the world's greatest warrior is here. Wipe your feet and wash your hands. Dinner is ready.
Future Anthony.
Such a Helga, right? That's her name, Helga?
Yes, Helga. Yep.
Yeah, it's such a Helga thing to say.
Yes, it is.
future Anthony's going to love going through and editing this episode, because the benefit for him is that he just gets to watch all of the magic happen. So while I could only see a little bit from looking up, I can't wait to watch that full process as as the YouTube audience will see that play out. All right, well, that is going to do it then. It was awesome to talk about this topic, learn all about Matt Hansel, and seeing the literal magic happen on his drawing page there. Thank you for being on the show with us tonight.
Oh,
And,
thank you for having me.
And I was just getting to my, I have a closing phrase that I kind of try to prepare here. But yeah, it was fun to have this show, Cartoonist by Night, and to reach out to a true, awesome, amazing cartoonist that is just you're giving gold when you post your warm up doodles and your the fan art with Beetle and Hagar and everything. Super excited to see that. Is there any comic books that you'd like to promote? Because I know we didn't talk about was it the cartoon puppet horror?
Cartoon Puppet Horror Theater.
Anything within like the recent years or anything you want to promote as we exit here?
Yeah, there's Township, which we talked about before. So I encourage everyone, if you want to subscribe to Township, we have a Substack that just launched, so you can subscribe through there. And Cartoon Puppet Horror Theater came out a couple years ago from American Mythology, so you can still order that, I think, from American Mythology. So please pick that up. And then be on the lookout for new Marty and Spud material.
All right.
Excellent.
I think I've seen that on Facebook.
Probably, yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah, I've seen your name a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And now you're
different. It must be part of the same Facebook comic strip groups as me.
Yes.
Sometimes post stuff. Yeah. There.
You're probably going to see his name a lot more after this episode.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Now, as I look, the Sunday paper is being delivered, so it's time to go read the funnies. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
You got it. Can't get things closed.
Dinosaur.
Dinosaur. Okay.
Okay.
I was crossing my eyes.